Is it just me or did this week fly by? Is that just me, Bill?
It's been a quick week. Feel good. We've given 110%.
Oh, no.
We've played like champions each and every day, of course. Focused on one day at a time, and now it's Friday. No
That was
injuries.
a great sitcom.
Now it's Friday. Missed that show.
Sorry, tell I'm older than you.
Which one?
One Day at a Time.
I missed
One
it.
Day at a Time. Which one was that? I remember
Yeah, you weren't even around yet.
Step by Step. Oh, I was trying to remember the one in Chicago. It was basically the first sitcom I ever remember. Kind of a spinoff of The Odd Couple. You guys would know this. It was like in the 80s. My dad used to watch all the time. I think he'd come on,
Well, if your dad used to watch all the time.
Friday.
Now I know it is.
Yeah, well, come on, you guys are. I mean, I'm the baby of the group here. I mean, what was it? I'm gonna have to look it up. No, Perfect Strangers. You guys remember Perfect Strangers?
Oh,
course.
Belky.
Yeah. All of a sudden, everybody's joining in. Yeah, I remember that. He's not that old.
I had no idea it was set in Chicago, though.
I'm pretty sure it was.
Yeah, I'm not saying it's not.
Yeah,
It
was.
That didn't stick out to me.
How about that?
I mean, I would have
Look at
gone.
me with my knowledge this morning.
I would have gone with the Cousin Larry, the Happy Dance. Like, that's what I remember from Perfect Strangers.
Yeah.
You remember that your dad watched it and was set
I
in
remember.
Chicago?
No, that was like,
Okay.
talk about things that you remember growing up.
Okay.
Little things that you remember growing up. I remember that.
Well, see, and One Day at a Time was based in Indianapolis, and it was like a single mom who gets out there, and it was like late 70s.
Okay.
So it was a time where, ERA, women being powerful, single mom, being a career woman.
You should see the fists.
I know, I'm sorry. That
of
really.
fury in here as she's
I
explaining
know
it.
you were really excited. I was just thinking this is what happens when we don't have a pre-show production meeting. We open up with 80 sitcoms.
It's Friday.
It is Friday. It feels good to be Friday.
And you act like our pre-production show meetings are really serious. Yesterday's talking about today's show was about how do you watch your baseball game, and then now that has morphed into video games today. So I think that's probably where we're going to go, and I'm looking forward to that. Also, we'll talk some Gamecock baseball, obviously in a big series at home. Final home series of the year. Missouri comes into town, and Missouri headed the wrong way in SEC play. The Gamecocks headed the right way. Mark Kingston says, for whatever reason, his team just hadn't played well in midweeks, and they have played well on the weekend. So he's hoping they can flush that one-hit shutout, the 9-0 loss they suffered the night before last against the College of Charleston, and be that team that we've seen in the SEC with 3 straight SEC series wins for the first time since 2012. We'll see. I'll let you hear from more of Mark Kingston as we roll on this morning. Dustin Johnson, one of 6 guys at the top of the leaderboard for the Players' Championship down in Jacksonville. 79 Phil Mickelson shot.
It wasn't a good day for him.
79 is tough for pros to do, man. I mean, when you get anywhere close to 80 and you're a pro, I mean, not to mention one of the best pros of all time, which Phil Mickelson is, and he was playing with Tiger Woods yesterday. Did you get to watch any of that? You check any of it out?
Watched a lot of it because obviously the feature group is Tiger, Phil, and Rory.
And they went off about 2 o'clock.
They went off at
yesterday,
2, so I called almost the entire afternoon round, and it was pretty entertaining. I enjoyed it and fun, just kind of. Well, not fun for Phil, but fun watching Tiger. And also, I don't want to say a developing storyline, but they were kind of going back and talking about what is kind of a budding friendship, because it's never been there, between Tiger and Phil. And even rehashing a story, I believe, from the Masters, where Roy McIlroy was doing a post pre-practice round press conference, and somebody mentioned, hey, Phil and Tiger out on the course playing a practice round together? And McIlroy said, we would have never thought that would happen.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, just kind of how all of a sudden, kind of the old age, and how Mickelson reached out to Tiger during Tiger's significant injury, and the two, they're not going out on the town together.
Did they have a half of a heart necklace?
Yeah, I was going to say
each?
there was no friendship bracelets, but apparently these two, which is kind of neat. And, you can kind of see that bonding is these two kind of move into the latter stages of their PGA Tour career. And with that being all the young guys that are up, you feel like they're kind of bonding together, going, we got to keep the young guys down. But not a day for Mickelson yesterday. As he, even at one point, he just, the body language wasn't there. He looked very frustrated. I think he turned around and yelled at somebody in the crowd and was having a rough day.
Tiger Woods finishes even par, so 6 shots back. Patrick Reed, the Masters winner, also at even par. Former Gamecock Wesley Bryan at 1 under, along with Rory McIlroy after 1 round at the Players' Championship, which we all kind of accept as the unofficial 5th major, and the field in this thing and the conditions are pretty fantastic. And again, Dustin Johnson, one of 6 guys, along with Webb Simpson and maybe another notable name, all all Americans except for Alex Noren at 6 under par. Former Clemson standout U.S. Open winner Lucas Glover also involved at the top of the leaderboard. 4 under par, just 2 shots back, tied for 13th. So it should be interesting to see where that goes. And I always like the players, a good bridge, I think, between the Masters and the U.S. Open, and certainly keeps me invested in golf at this time of year, kind of starts to develop a storyline. Like if Patrick Reed can get all the way back in contention, he becomes much more of a story. If Tiger can work his way back into the leaderboard here, maybe Dustin Johnson starts to become more of the storyline here if he takes this thing wire to wire for sure, being the number one player in the world and being from around here. I think a lot of us probably pay more attention to him than some others. But the Players' Championship going on down in Jacksonville, the weekend of baseball for the Gamecocks. College baseball is always weird with the midweek stuff, right? And this year in particular has been something like I don't think we've seen. I know when the College of Charleston beat the Gamecocks, they became the 6th in-state school to beat Carolina, and that did happen back in 2015. So it has happened. But what didn't happen in 2015 is the success that we've seen now, the 3 straight weekends in the SEC, and the Gamecocks seem to find their stride and yet still struggle now in the midweek. So this year's team has been wildly uneven. Mm-hmm. And we've seen it best displayed with a loss to Presbyterian in midweek, that shutout loss, so the one hit just the other night at the College of Charleston. And then on the weekend, they absolutely just crushed the ball and had been averaging basically 9 runs for the last 10 games. So a huge weekend because Missouri does not carry the weight of what we've seen the last 3 weekends in the SEC. Vanderbilt, national champion recently, and doing it on the road. LSU, the team of all of college baseball throughout the 1990s, and then Ole Miss, one of the best teams in the country this year, just last weekend. So what Carolina does this weekend might go more to give us the feel of this season than any series that we've had, just because they do what they've done the last 2 times Missouri comes to town. I think your Gamecock fans who were severely disappointed just 2 nights ago are right back to where they were. I mean, you can dismiss it. Midweek game, those emotions, Chad Holbrook, who cares? Doesn't matter. You sweep Missouri, and you go to 16-11 in conference play. Whew, that's solid going to the last weekend. You're almost playing with house money at Texas A&M the last weekend series of the season. You win 2 out of 3. I think it's looked at as a successful weekend for sure. 15-12 rolling in that final series is great. You don't win the series against a team that's really struggled now in the SEC. And then I think more doubts, more chatter about that, more worry about the NCAA tournament and seeding and what's going to happen there certainly starts to creep in here in the final few games of the regular season.
Well, no, I think what you just said, if you were to lose the series this weekend, you bring into play falling back out of the NCAA tournament. I don't know if there's a set number of wins, if there's something particular that South Carolina needs to do in order to say, okay, we're comfortable with where we're at going into the NCAA tournament. Again,
I think finishing over 500 in conference play, right? So winning three of the last 6 games.
All right.
I
can get on board with that. 16-14?
It would make most people feel pretty comfortable, I think, about getting into the NCAA tournament. Now, I think that would be you might get a 2 seed, you might get a 3 seed. Ultimately, it doesn't really matter in a 4-team regional because number 2 plays number 3. But you're still, I think, pretty firmly in the tournament. You win more than half your games in the SEC this year.
Yeah, and that's something certainly to keep an eye on, and just in terms of this coming weekend. But it's weird, and I will show up Monday and I'll say I was wrong. That happens typically. I just feel like South Carolina is going to play one of their better series this weekend. Some things that Trey Dyson, Ryan Jeffcoat were talking about yesterday in terms of South Carolina playing better as the underdog. Mm-hmm. This just feels like a weekend. South Carolina will come bouncing back, get a good performance tonight from Logan Chapman, Adam Hill.
But not an underdog going into the Missouri series.
Excuse me. Yeah, and I don't know. Yeah, that's a good point. I was thinking about that. Let me ask, is this I know that there's the Tuesday night, so not the final games at Founders Park this weekend. This will be senior weekend. I believe they'll do it on Saturday. Is this it for Adam Hill? Do you say goodbye on Friday on tomorrow?
Yeah, I think you've brought that up many times.
You think he's gone? I think you're.
Yeah, and I think this is the typical baseball path, and
right.
I think it's best for his career if he moves on. I think that typically is how it goes. Michael Roth was the big-time exception back in the day, getting drafted and having a chance to go on to professional baseball and then coming back. Sam Dyson did that as well. So there have been exceptions for the Gamecocks through the years, but you look and you play the percentages, and you especially from a pitching career standpoint, you only got so many innings in the arm. Hill already dealing with some injury issues, so I think it probably will be, but it's all speculation at this point. I think what really needs to happen for this team is for a guy like Adam Hill to have another good outing like he did last weekend, but for the other guys around him. Logan Chapman going tonight and then Cody Morris on Sunday. Those guys have not had solid outings really here in the last few weeks, and that's been another part of the head-scratching 10-game performance that Carolina won 8 out of 10 and those 3 straight SEC series. They did it by just basically crushing the baseball outside of that start to the LSU series. So it's going to be really interesting to see. But, yeah, I would be surprised if we were to see Adam Hill at Founders Park outside of this weekend again.
Makes sense. So, again, an interesting weekend. This one, obviously, there'll be a lot of emotion, and we'll find out how it goes. But I do think South Carolina starts tonight and plays very well throughout the weekend. And you would feel like if they were to sweep, you mentioned that would get them to 16 conference wins.
There you go. You're over 500.
Secure your spot in the NCAA tournament.
And as usual game times this weekend for Carolina, Missouri. 7 o'clock start time tonight. Our coverage will begin at 6:45 right here on 107.5 The Game. 4 o'clock Saturday, 1:30 on Sunday. In big league baseball, I mentioned Vanderbilt, that happened recently. We saw David Price roll through Columbia a couple of times, came through obviously with Vanderbilt, and was the best player in college baseball, I think, in his final year. And also he was Team USA's ace and pitched over at Capital City Stadium back in the day when they played an exhibition game here as well. And he has one of the most interesting stories that we've heard in big league baseball in a while, out because of carpal tunnel syndrome. And he's talking about his love for video games. And now he's saying, well, if I got to quit, I got to quit. It makes us think about maybe the best video games or the ones we're most attached to in our old man life. And then the controversy with college football and the video games and the whole deal and how that might come back as well. We'll get into that as we roll on this one.
Part of it's the whole, this Fortnite game, man.
Right. Have you done it?
I haven't, and I told somebody last night I feel so old because not only, like, this is one of the first times that I have ever felt like really old because I completely don't understand what's going on. We get John and Claudia in here every day, and I think I'm supposed to go have a date night with John and Natty Light and pizza and learn the game, but I don't understand this Fortnite game in the least.
Oh, well, what about Patrick? He's all over it. Our new intern here in for his second day. Maybe he can give us the insight for the kids. Wanted you to hear a little bit from Mark Kingston talking about his approach headed into this weekend, taking on Missouri, the series opener tonight, 7 o'clock.
Every time we play poorly in the midweek, we bounce back. And so just need to repeat that. It's the bottom line. For whatever reason, we haven't played well in the midweek games, but for a while now, we've played very well on weekends, and we just need to continue that. So having that experience to draw on definitely helps you to do it again.
Believe immediately after the 9-0 College of Charleston loss the other night, he says this team has proven it knows how to take a punch and then get right back up. And then that's a similar sentiment you heard from his press conference yesterday. Not surprising, but I think there does have to be some confidence, Bill, that this team has proven that time and time again. I mean, that has added to the confusion about this team, how we're supposed to think about it, because we've seen it in a ton of instances, not just midweek bouncing back on the weekend, but inside of weekends when you get blown out at Kentucky to start the series and then you turn right around and blow them out. When you lose the series opener to Florida, turn right around and score 15 runs the next day. So there are a lot of instances of this team being able to almost flip a switch and be a completely different team from one day to the next.
Yeah, and it's interesting playing what was mentioned yesterday about the underdog role and playing better and not playing good during the midweek games, and the bats have gone silent at times. And then, of course, what we've seen the previous 10 games to Wednesday night was a team that basically looked like they were out there hitting a bunch of beach balls. I mean, they just flat out couldn't miss. And Missouri comes in. Missouri was playing good baseball. You mentioned the non-conference record was really good, and they've kind of struggled in SEC play, I believe. You mentioned, what are they, 9 and 15 now is what their conference record is.
At the bottom of the East.
So how South Carolina bounces back this weekend. Plus, you've got senior weekend. You've got a lot of players that'll be seniors that will kind of be experiencing their final home series for the Gamecocks this weekend. And so it's going to be a fascinating glimpse into how Mark Kingston can kind of motivate and get this team back on track. I think if they lose 5-4 on Wednesday night, nobody says as much, right?
Right. No doubt.
But going back, and I'm still the belief, hey, it's baseball and it's no big deal, and you move on. I think more of the upset and the anger comes to the coach you lost to and not the team you lost to. But with that being said, how can Mark Kingston refocus this team, get them back on the diamond? And, again, with a lot of things going on this weekend, how do they perform?
Mm-hmm. And maybe some of that depends on how much video game time they get. What is the deal? Let's get a actual perspective on someone who's done this before. So, Patrick, you are 22?
Yes,
22. 22. It's day number 2 of the internship. Patrick is a USC student. Tell us about Fortnite, sir, because I bring this up because David Price, the Boston Red Sox ace, says he's just a product of the video game generation. He plays it all the time. His teammates play it. There are major league teams who play it on their Jumbotron. I think the Brewers did that the other day. But he's been out because of carpal tunnel and will finally be back. He says he'll give up video games if he has to.
Let me read. This is off of ESPN.com, so this is not Dan's websites, Boston. We consider ESPN legitimate, right?
Well, Dan's pretty legit,
okay,
in my opinion.
All right. This is from an article yesterday. It says Red Sox pitcher David Price said Thursday that video games are not the cause of his carpal tunnel syndrome. It says he begins it with not, but stressed he won't play the popular Fortnite in the team clubhouse again due to avoid the distraction it has caused. It goes on to say a longtime video game enthusiast, the Red Sox ace, was diagnosed this week with carpal tunnel syndrome. He's not pitched since May 3rd, but is scheduled to return Saturday at Toronto. He insists that while video games might have contributed to his carpal tunnel, they are not to blame for the origin of the swelling of his left thumb, index, and middle finger.
Okay, so the next sentence I needed to hear was, what is then, sir? Have you been typing up a doctoral thesis? What have you been doing? What's the deal? Because carpal tunnel I always associated just with typing on a keyboard. You guys as well? You with me? Like administrative assistants?
But some people, yeah. Or some people are just like,
right,
just have structural issues
sure.
and stuff like that.
But that usually wouldn't come up when you're a 32-year-old pitcher.
Well, but all right, let me give you the rest. Let me give you the rest of the article, and then go back and explain something that happened at the South Carolina Cookout, and then we'll go to Patrick here. But Price goes on to say, this is just something that happened over time. It didn't stem from any one thing. I'm born in 1985, so that's the video games generation. Being a Red Sox is the least amount of video games I've ever played being in the major leagues. He then goes on to say, I saw the Brewers were playing Fortnite on their Jumbotron. This is very common. I know a lot of teams, a lot of guys who are really into it. I've always played video games. I've always played it with my teammates during the offseason, at the field, at the hotel. That's kind of my generation. That's what we do. If I need to shut down video games and pick a new hobby, then so be it. But I don't think that that's the cause.
Okay, so what I'm hearing there is the old non-apology apology. Like, if you didn't think it was the cause, then why are you saying you're going to quit if you need to quit? And then why are you saying you play less now than you ever did before? Why are you defending the whole video game thing if that's not the cause?
And Price goes on to say he believes the injury can be controlled. Thank goodness. He'll just wear a brace and will switch to his right hand for activities such as brushing his teeth.
So he just started brushing his teeth? He's been brushing more aggressively recently, and that has caused this makes no sense. I think anybody who has a brain and reads these comments is saying, oh, he's playing too many video games.
So you're listening to this, and you're thinking, all right, because this is where it's all started. We've kind of joked with John, our student section correspondent, about Fortnite. 2 weeks ago, South Carolina, 3 weeks ago, I think, had a big Spurs Up cookout. They invited a bunch of prospects from around.
Recruiting prospects, high school kids.
One of the things they did was they set up kind of a mega TV. I don't want to call it a Jumbotron because it wasn't what's in the stadium, and it also wasn't a 65-inch. It was somewhere in between.
So it was like a movie screen.
Yeah, like a movie screen. And they had it set up where the kids could go and play Fortnite.
Mm-hmm.
And so this video games have all, look, I will admit at 36, I will still play with my son. Now,
you and I differ on this thing pretty highly. Like, once I got out of college, I just thought to myself, I can't own a video game system anymore. I gotta move on. It's time to be an adult. You didn't make that.
Didn't make that switch. Now, with that being said, I also don't any longer sit and just play by myself.
Okay.
Like if the kids are in bed, if everybody's gone, I'm not going, all right, time to fire up the old PlayStation and see what's going on. Let me get online and track down another
you
kid.
have not played Fortnite?
No, and what makes me feel old real quick before we go to him, I don't, because this is about to be learning, I really don't understand this game at all. And that's the first time I've ever been like, man.
Okay, Patrick, let me see if I can give an old guy summary of this thing, and you can tell me exactly how wrong I am. So this is something that is free to play online. It's almost as many people as possible, or it's basically no limit, as opposed to like 4 players playing at a time or whatever. You can hop in, and it can be 1,000 people playing in one game at a time or something crazy. And it is all the craze with the youngsters, to sound really old.
Yeah, so I've never seen a video game that just took over like this. It is free. I think free is the main thing, but it's not unlimited. It's 100 players.
Okay.
And essentially what it is Hunger Games. So 100 players drop in. You drop in with nothing. You pick up guns, weapons, supplies, wood and stuff. And I don't know if you know what Minecraft is. I was never really into it, but it was the last like kind of huge thing.
Mm-hmm.
And essentially you just build your own little world. Like you pick up these materials and build. So what's kind of Fortnite can be played any different way. Like some guys build a lot, some guys just go in there and play it like Call of Duty.
But also across all kind of platforms, right? You can just play this on your phone.
Yeah, they just released a mobile app, so they have it on the phone. The PC guys, they all play on their PCs, but I played on my Xbox just like anything else.
Okay, there you go. Fortnite from. So do you consider yourself a highly skilled Fortnite?
No, see that's why I feel like David Price is lying, because first of all, there's nothing more satisfying than winning a game of Fortnite when you're the last one standing out of 100 people.
Okay.
And when you
Right,
lose,
there's
Nothing more. I mean, I know
Not
you're
in video
young,
games.
but okay.
Well, at least
all
he
right.
doesn't have kids and said that, right? That would be sad.
So, yeah, I mean, if you lose, sometimes the games go about 25 minutes. Sometimes you'll die in 30 seconds and you'll be really unsatisfied. Sometimes you'll be the second person standing and you'll play for 20 minutes and come in second place. And that's when you have to just keep restarting.
But you don't get any. Do you build up like points? Does it keep track of
the only way they make
games?
money is they have people pay like $10, and the $10 battle pass, all it gets you is new outfits and things like that that don't affect you anyway. It doesn't help you, but everybody wants to look like the best Fortniter, so they want the best outfits and whatnot.
Have you paid to play?
Oh, we did. Everybody in my house split it 4 ways.
Spent your $10?
Yeah, $10. Times
Wait,
were tough earlier.
there's
in this
so
semester.
many things that have just happened in that conversation. From
Mark Kingston, certainly, he uses that new pitching machine, and they use new technology, which kind of goes into our video game conversation, right? It's not quite a video game, what they do, right? But it does have components of it. I mean, the data that it takes in, what Carolina does from a hitting perspective now is almost like Top Golf. Have you ever done Top Golf?
no, that's the one in Charlotte. I think they got a Charlotte.
It's a national thing.
Okay.
It's amazing. It's really fun. It's like a driving range, but then your golf balls that you hit get tracked electronically, and you have the monitor right beside you. You can play different games. You got, as opposed to just the 50 yards, the 100 yards, the 150-yard signs, they actually have almost like a target. It's like basically, it's kind of like, I explain it like archery or darts with golf.
Right.
And then you play different games and the whole thing. And that's what, the new technology they have with baseball is you can see your launch angle, the exit velocity, the whole thing. So you take a swing and then you get all the data after it.
Well, we have one thing that I'd seen a few years ago that started being used for college football was the virtual reality, where the quarterbacks would go into the quarterback meeting room and they'd put the virtual reality kind of on them from what they filmed actually in practice, and were able to translate it.
Sure.
It goes back, and I
know with Clemson was one of the first few programs to use that.
I did not download the Fortnite app on my phone because, again, I feel there's a need for other things on my phone to not waste 150 megabits or whatever it was that was going to take up. But like the things you can do now with these games and this technology and the way it's kind of transformed games. And look, David Price is 32. I mean, I'm 36. I still play video games with my son. I don't. If I'm sitting at the house by myself, I'm not like, all right.
Yeah, but you got to adjust his age. He's a 32-year-old baseball player. Like he still plays.
Oh, okay.
A
So
kid's game.
that equals 18 now? Is
No,
like an
maybe
18
not even. Have you ever been in a big league locker room or a clubhouse? It is not a place where a lot of adult conversations are being had. I mean, there is still towel snapping and showers being
yeah,
big.
the old towel snapping.
And you got a bunch of downtime, card play, and video game playing, the whole thing.
My son, Austin, he plays. He's gotten into WWE, which I'm actually a little concerned about. You talk about the parent thing because now I'm like having to like, hey, listen, you can't jump off the couch. I was laying on the floor the other day watching him, and all of a sudden he did a move, so he ran over, he jumped on the couch and like jumped on me and dropped an elbow. And as a parent, both you're like, that's hilarious, and you're also like, don't do that anymore. You can't. You'll hurt somebody. And so, but I played WWE wrestling with him the other day, whatever, and I got demolished.
Nice.
Like the 6-year-old's just absolutely like crushing my character on the game. I thought, man, I'm not. Let's put back in college football, son. Let's go back with college football, and also he's got into celebrations. But the games and the technology has so dramatically changed. And you talk about Mark Kingston and being able to take that technology and translate it over, and then you talk about college football being able to take that technology and translate it over. And it is fascinating how it also kind of all ties in with video games and what I guess guys are doing in locker rooms, or you even hear with South Carolina building that new football facility.
Right.
Basically, part of it is you're going to have a room with mega TVs in it where guys can go in and play whatever the latest video game is, the latest technology, and hang out and just kind of be around.
Dakereon Joyner, one of those new guys for the Gamecocks, the highly touted quarterback out of Fort Dorchester, helped them to win a state championship when he was just a sophomore there, and Mr. Football in the state of South Carolina this past year. Is he going to have to play a different position? I think this was wildly surprising. Not that it has been mentioned, but it got mentioned so early by a guy who played quarterback in Tom Luganbill, an ESPN college football analyst. I guess he brought it up first in a radio interview, and then he backed it up on a tweet when someone suggested that Joyner would transfer from South Carolina before he would switch positions. He said that would not be a smart move on his part. How do you read this at this point?
Well, here's the one thing that I take away from Tom Luganbill. Tom Luganbill made a comment that Dakereon Joyner is kind of new at the quarterback position, and that's not true at all. And when you say something like that,
college football is the first spring, and he shouldn't even be.
That means like Josh Vann, the top wide receiver, is new to the wide receiver position to college football. So should he switch positions?
But isn't it different for quarterbacks who have to know where every single player is, and different systems translate differently? The college system obviously much more.
But the reason he's talking about it is because of his passing ability and watching one spring game when Dakereon Joyner should have been getting ready for his prom. Now, what happened here is, and this is not just Tom Luganbill, this is some of the fan base. We had the phone calls as well when Jake Bentley was struggling. People going, well, Dakereon Joyner will be here in the spring, and he's going to challenge Jake Bentley, and there's going to be a quarterback competition. No, there was never going to be a quarterback competition. I think people with quarterbacks get so caught up too often in a Deshaun Watson or the true freshman who comes in. Those are rare.
Right. I mean, you couldn't even come up with another guy that quickly besides Deshaun Watson.
Yeah, I'm trying to think. Jameis Winston. Look, Jake Fromm. Jake Fromm is not the reason Georgia got to the national championship game this year.
But it helped.
Well, but he had he had a great defense, and he had two really good running backs behind him, and he had a very good offensive line. Could have Jacob Eason got them there? Maybe. I mean, if Eason had made, but we saw what Eason did as a true freshman, right? I mean, it's
in Columbia was one of the ugliest things I've ever seen.
And so I think that's part of it. Now, I will say this: the news coming out last night. I think the bigger challenge to Dakereon Joyner is not can he play the position. It's the guy that's coming in behind him. If people have been watching, you're not a recruiting nerd, so that's fine. You haven't paid attention to this news. Ryan Helinski could very well end up being the number one quarterback in the class of 2019. You're shaking your head and you're rolling your eyes, and I think you just passed out and fell to the floor.
What does that mean, man? And what happened last night?
Ohio State has offered him, LSU. Like, everybody has offered this guy. South Carolina now, and this is the guy coming in, again, from Orange Lutheran out of California. Again, he's going to end up being, I think, possibly a 4 or 5. He's going to end up being a 4-star prospect. He could end up being a 5-star prospect. This is a young man who now, as you start to get these guys who are kind of quarterback, I want to say Chip Kelly and UCLA just offered him earlier this week. Again, Ohio State and Urban Meyer, and I will say Urban Meyer does seem to know a thing or two about quarterbacks, has offered him. I mean, Ryan Helinski right now coming in, this is the guy. If you thought Dakereon Joyner was going to have some hype to him, I think Ryan Helinski is going to be a guy who has a lot of hype to him, and you give credit to Will Muschamp and his staff for getting on, and Kurt Roper, by the way. Give credit to Kurt Roper because Roper was one of the first to identify him and offer him early, and Dan Werner and then Will Muschamp were able to kind of finalize that thing. But when we talk about Dakereon Joyner, he just needs time. And I don't know if you redshirt him this year so that he doesn't have to worry about anything, or if you have a special package for him.
But that's the part I think that's interesting from Luganbill's perspective. He says the guy could be Percy Harvin. Joyner could be Percy Harvin. I mean, that's high praise. Harvin dominated college football, and I don't think Tim Tebow has the numbers that he did without a guy like Percy Harvin making all kind of plays for him after relatively easy throws. Do you see that in Dakereon Joyner? I haven't watched him play. I didn't watch him play enough in high school to weigh in on what he can do with the ball in his hands from a running perspective.
I don't know if you...
Because to me, he was always a really good high school quarterback, which included most of the time throwing the football.
Yeah, and I think Dakereon Joyner needs whatever he does this year, 2 or 3 years to find out. You can't... He's been on campus for, 5 months? Yeah, it's May, 5 months. And I understand, Luganbill is. I understand what he's saying, but I also it's hard to make that assessment based on 5 months and having watched 1 or 2 practices. Maybe he's right. Maybe he is right, but I also think that that's an extremely early judgment on him, especially given that he doesn't have to be thrown to the wolves immediately.
Right.
Like I know some people, because some people have already said, well, what about Lorenzo Nunez? 4-star guy coming out of Georgia. But Lorenzo Nunez, unfortunately, got thrown to the wolves immediately because South Carolina's quarterback situation. Connor Mitchell went down.
And also, Nunez's high school stats were almost non-existent from a passing standpoint. He had to run mostly in high school. He was mostly a running quarterback. I know he played 7-on-7 and impressed people with his arms outside of that. But to me, I think maybe the better comparison is Savell Newton to Dakereon Joyner.
Well, no,
right?
let's use a guy who Lamar Jackson. Lamar Jackson. Lamar Jackson comes in as a true freshman, completed 54% of his passes, 1,800 yards, and 12 touchdowns. Now, I'm not trying to say Dakereon Joyner is going to be Lamar Jackson, but Lamar Jackson was 6'3", 210 pounds. There's some similar build there in Jackson and Dakereon Joyner.
I think Joyner's more 6'1", 6'2", right?
Well, yeah, that's what I'm saying, about a similar. I thought Lamar Jackson was 6'1" until I just looked at his ESPN bio and it listed him at 6'3". I didn't realize he was that tall. But his freshman year, Lamar Jackson, 12 touchdowns passing, 55% completion percentage, 1,800 yards passing. I don't know if that's necessarily the kind of stats, and I'm pulling up to see how many games he played in that year because I can't remember if he started immediately right off the get-go. I think he had to alternate some.
But the reason why I don't see an equivalent here is that Dakereon Joyner most likely will not get on the field as a quarterback his freshman year.
But that's my point. He's not being thrown into the mix.
So why not? If he's really athletic, like Savell Newton did his freshman season, he played wide receiver exclusively because I think he had Dondrell Pinkins ahead of him at that point, who was way down his career and had a better handle on the quarterback position.
Here's the question. Does Dakereon Joyner mind redshirting to develop quarterback skills? I don't. From what I remember of Savell Newton, he had zero interest in redshirting, and they had to have him on the field.
And here's the better question for the Gamecocks, who have finished in triple digits in total offense and scoring offense in the last couple of years. Do they need a playmaker like him on the field with what they have coming back from a proven production?
Shouldn't.
Right.
They shouldn't.
I agree.
With Shi Smith and Ortre Smith and Debo Samuel and Brian Edwards. No, they shouldn't. And I think that's the other thing. You leave him at quarter, the kid could end up being very good. I think it's way too soon to judge that and make any kind of assessment. I understand people want to throw things out there like that. We'll see what Dakereon Joyner will be. To me, South Carolina's quarterback position will be perfectly fine. We'll see what Jake Bentley is getting some preseason love here. I saw he was named, I think CBS Sports just named him the 14th best quarterback in the country. I saw one of those incredibly way too early mock drafts had him being drafted fairly early next year. He's got to have a good season to be able to do that, but I feel South Carolina's quarterback position's in a good spot.
Brian McClendon kind of echoing your sentiments there, just saying it's way too early, just one spring practice when a guy should be in high school, to say that you should switch positions, and he thinks that Dakereon Joyner still has a bright future playing quarterback. That's from the offensive coordinator, Brian McClendon, last night down in Atlanta where the Spurs Up speaking tour was. So in your opinion, Bill, will Dakereon Joyner ever played quarterback for the University of South Carolina?
Yes, he will. Now, will he?
Okay, I like the answer to that. Let's make it very simple before we make things overly complicated, like we love to do here on Sports Talk Radio. Will Dakereon Joyner ever play another position at the University of South Carolina as well?
I'm going to say yes, and the reason I think so is because I think Ryan Helinski is going to be that good. I think I know this is hard to believe, and look, all I think is that Will Muschamp continues to upgrade the talent level here on that roster, and that unfortunately, unlike running back or wide receiver, you really only got one quarterback, and we'll see. Maybe Brian McClendon does like a 2-quarterback system, and Ryan Helinski's not going to be the dual-threat quarterback that Dakereon Joyner is, and so maybe they end up having a dual system, maybe similar to Dylan Thompson and Connor Shaw, where Helinski's more of the starter, but you see Dylan.
Yeah, I don't even consider that a 2-quarterback system, though.
I guess my thing is I'm basing it on recruiting hype, which, you make fun of me, but let's be serious for a minute. I'm basing it on that, and I think Helinski's going to end up being the guy that ends up replacing Jake Bentley. Helinski's going to enroll early. Mm-hmm. Again, I think Dakereon Joyner could end up being a good quarterback. I also think at some point, does Dakereon Joyner look around and say, and we don't know based on one spring game, but he's not Percy Harvin. What made Percy Harvin, why I think that's such an unfair comparison, what made Percy Harvin so good was his speed.
But you're talking about what Tom Luganbill, ESPN college football analyst, said. He says that Dakereon Joyner could be like Percy Harvin. To me, that's like the ultimate compliment from an athletic standpoint. The guy in college football was a tremendous Percy Harvin for Florida.
Oh,
I agree. It's an unfair question to ask right now. I understand, but the reason I do it is because we've seen it to a certain degree from Savell Newton at South Carolina. Right. He had success basically everywhere he went in college. Every position he played all of them almost. Mm-hmm. I mean, wide receiver he started at because of experience at quarterback. Then he moved into quarterback, and I think he might still have the Gamecock record for most touchdown passes in his debut. I think he had 4 of them in his very first game. He threw 3 of them up to Sidney Rice, if I remember correctly, Florida Atlantic.
I was going to say, I guess Connor Shaw started before the Kentucky game. He started the East Carolina game. So,
right.
Because the Kentucky game I think he threw 5. But to me, the bottom line is I'm just basing it on nothing more, because I have nothing more to base it on than recruiting hype. I mean, that's all I'm doing here.
Keep in mind, if we were going to do that based on relatively recent past history, then the projections would have been way off the board. Like Connor Mitch was obviously the next successor, or you even go back to Chris Smelly, who had a tremendous high school career. Right. Steve Spurrier always said he played a bunch of quarterback, and he liked that, and it didn't work out well.
Yeah, all I'm doing is basing my opinion on that because Ryan Helinski, I think, by the time we get around to December and the final recruiting rankings, is going to end up being one of the top 2 or 3 quarterbacks in the country in this recruiting class, regardless of dual threat or passing or whatever you want to label him. And he's going to enroll early, and he's just all of a sudden looking like the guy that could end up coming in and being the next guy behind Jake Bentley. But listen, I'm not writing, I think it's stupid to write Dakereon Joyner off. The young man was phenomenal when you put him on the field for Fort Dorchester, and he's only been through 15 practices at the college level, 14 practices and a spring game. I think that is ridiculous to write him off, and I think it'll be fascinating to see whether or not whether he redshirts this year or not. I think you get to the spring or the fall and where he's at.
Great suggestions and write-in votes via the Shepherd's Glass inbox. Going to try to get to as many as we can here in the final minute of the program. Jamie goes with so many good games out there, so many systems. We asked you best video game ever because of the David Price situation. He goes with Contra, Arch Rivals, Road Rash, Driver, Red Dead Redemption, Triple Play. Okay, but he says EA Football by far the best, and that's certainly gotten the most votes on the Frank's Discount Tire poll question. Give you the final results in just a second. Robert went the other way. He went the worst video game, the Sega 2K3, had Eric Crouch on the cover, but had a different guy starting for Nebraska at quarterback. I guess he had probably already moved on. And tried to sell games.
Well, yeah, because you couldn't have. I understand what he's saying, but remember, you couldn't have
the actual
player.
You could have their numbers, and that wasn't Eric Crouch's even number. He said. You could have had number 7 instead it was number 10.
No, okay.
Chuck Mullen, bases loaded. You throw at the cleanup hitter so he gets into a fight and gets thrown out of the game. Well
I
done,
played
sir.
bases loaded. That was a good one.
Final Frank's Discount Tire poll question results in at Tim Hill 1075, where we got a bunch of votes in. Thank you for all your participation again. 301 votes in. 74% of you going with EA College Football as the best video game ever. Tecmo Bowl gets second place. Madden Football in third, and NBA Jam in fourth.